Hi everyone, my name is Christina and I'm an implementation consultant at Prosymmetry. In this video, I will be reviewing how to create project workflows in Tempus. A project workflow allows you to create projects that will have multiple stages before you get to the point where you are making allocations. A common use case for creating project workflows is if you want to create a project intake process to collect information about the project and maybe move it through an approvals process before the project is officially added to your portfolio. Different users can have different access to the different stages of the workflow depending on what role they play in getting the project moved throughout the different stages. Let's now look at some basic navigation and configuration of a project workflow. To do this, I will click into Admin Settings and then go to Workflow Management. Project workflows are comprised of three different components represented by these three tabs at the top. First, I have my states. These represent the stages of the workflow. Then I have project forms. These represent the forms where you are collecting the information that is needed to be gathered at each state of your workflow. And then I have the actual workflows tab. This is where those states and the forms are connected to create a workflow type. We recommend that the order of operations when you create your intake workflows are creating the states first, then the forms, and then the workflow itself where you connect the two. Let's walk through an example of a workflow I have built, which is a project intake workflow. So first I'm going to go to my states tab. And here is a state that I have built for this workflow with the different stages. If I click the pencil icon, we can see how it was built. First, I gave the entire group of states a name, which is project approval. Then I created the states the workflow will need to go through. So I have an initiation state, a review state, and an approval state. With each state, I can assign access to certain groups of people or individual people. The first state, however, by default, will always be available to all resources. Then let's go to the Project Forms tab, where I will create the forms that I want to be associated with each state. I have one form for each state, but you can reuse forms for the same state if you need to. So let's take a look at my initiation state form, for example. Within each form, I am able to bring in attributes on the right-hand side that I want my users to fill out at each state. Any attributes you want to pull into your workflow forms will need to be created in attribute management in admin settings first. You can see in this form I have two different sections where I have brought attributes into them by dragging and dropping. As I bring fields into my form, I can also click the preview button to see how it will look to my end users. So I can see the different sections I have built and the information I want gathered within this initiation form. This works very much like a drag and drop form builder, and once I like how my form looks, I can click Save Form. Once all of my states and forms are created, I can go back to the Workflows tab. And here is where I can connect my states to my forms and assign access levels to them. So let's click into my overall project intake workflow to see how it was built. I have given the overall workflow a name called Project Intake. I have also given it a description, and then I have assigned the overall permission for who can create projects with this workflow type to initiate this process, which is all resources. Then I have pulled in the overall state that is associated with this workflow, which is my project approval state, and those three states at the bottom represented here. I will come back to these two options here, and let's take a look first below at this grid to see how I am creating the overall workflow. So here I have connected my initiation state to my initiation form, my review state to my manager review form, and then my approval state to my final sign-off form. In the middle, I have assigned view and edit access to each state. Access to workflow states and the forms that they are associated with builds on itself by assigning access to the state level first, as we saw in the States tab, and then the workflow itself on this screen. At each state, I do have the option to set a default landing page as well when the workflow is in that state, to maybe alert the user when the project is in that state, this page needs to be reviewed. Going back to these two additional options here, before I save this workflow, you will see first I can choose to make this a linear workflow. This would allow users to mark the next state of the workflow as the current state in sequence to ensure no steps are skipped. We'll take a look at a workflow that is not linear and then one that is to see the difference. You will also see here the option to apply a project template to a workflow. This is to help save time when a new workflow project is created. That template will be applied automatically to the project with the associated attributes and maybe existing allocations. Let's now take a look at a workflow that is applied to a project. So I will bring up another screen where we can see this project, new project November 2024, has a workflow applied denoted by this icon. When I click into the project, I am brought to the Workflow tab. The states we established are represented as steps on the right-hand side here, and at each state, the associated form we chose will appear here, where your user can enter the information that needs to be gathered. Let's now see how linear workflows are applied as well as those project templates. Currently, this workflow was saved as not linear. This means that I, as the user, can click to the other states and choose to mark them as the current state in any order I want to. So I could go from state 1 to 3 and mark it as current state, skipping step 2. Now let's toggle on the linear option. Click Save, and then I will go back to my workflow project and click Refresh. Now that this workflow has been saved as linear, you can see that although I can still skip to state 3, for example, I cannot mark state 3 as the current state until state 2 is completed. This ensures that no steps are missed in the workflow. Now let's look at how a project template can be applied. Currently, this workflow does not have a template associated with it, but let's choose to apply one. So from my dropdown, I will choose to apply the Aurora template and click Save. Now, as a user, if I go to create a project using this workflow, create project and click project intake, let's give it a name. I can see that the start and end date has already been filled out to match that Aurora template. And if I click Save and visit the allocations page, I will see that those allocations from that Aurora template have already been applied here. Finally, as projects are submitted via the workflow stage can be brought into the project management list to quickly see where things stand for your different projects. So within this grid, I will pull in from my columns the workflow state. That way I can get a quick view of which state each project workflow is in to quickly see where things stand for my different projects. This wraps up creating a project intake workflow in Tempus. I would encourage you to take a look at the Help Center section on this feature as well as an additional resource. And if you want to learn how to submit a new project using the workflow, please check out that dedicated video. Thanks and have a great day.